Hello, my name is Linette Keller, and I'm a student with Walden University, and I'm currently doing my practicum right now with Counseling Solutions, working my way towards graduation. And I'm here to interview Mr. Richard Ellis today, and he's going to talk to us about his background, how extensive it is, give us some more insight about your pedigree, and we're going to have a brief discussion on what it is that we're here to do today.
Okay, pedigree, isn't that dogs?
No,
I think it is, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
Okay. All right. Richard Ellis is my name. I've been a counselor since 1998. Did my degree at Vanderbilt, as they say in Nashville, the Harvard of the South. So that's worked in a bunch of different areas of treatment, and so I'll be glad to talk to you about that.
Alrighty, well, give us some background as to what it is that you study, what your area of expertise is, your focus.
I was a youth pastor for 22 years, so I've been working with adolescents since 1981 professionally, but the last 20 years or so as a counselor. And as I began, my first private practice was kids in foster care. Okay. And those are typically kids with lots of depression, lots of anxiety, issues of abuse. And so, I love that work. I think I know pretty much how to approach the depression, the anxiety. They're fairly well-known approaches to dealing with psychological, physical, sexual abuse. And so I seem to be very successful with those, but not too much with the ADHD. Okay. I don't know that I've seen a study on it, but my guess is probably 75% of kids in foster care have some symptoms of ADHD.
Interesting.
So that's my guess. I haven't seen a study on it, but that wouldn't surprise me, as opposed to probably about 10% of the general population. So I really struggled, and I went on a year-long search to try to find a solution for a counseling approach that actually works with those kids. Okay. And I'll never forget reading in a book by Malcolm Gladwell these words. And it changed the direction of my practice in tremendous ways. I'm pedaling a bicycle with my brain. And he went on to talk about neurofeedback as a way to treat ADHD and how good the results were. So I read and studied and researched, and finally the company that he actually referenced was no longer in business. So I had to keep looking, and finally found the organization and the people who actually do that with kids with ADHD, and was intrigued and just fascinated by the research that they were doing.
Okay. So you work with ADHD. What about areas such as dyslexia and children who are struggling with their reading, who may potentially be dyslexic?
Well, actually, the work with my dyslexic clients actually came out a result of the association with the folks who are doing neurofeedback with ADHD kids, because neurofeedback with kids with dyslexia is very effective. Okay. In fact, I had a kid one summer who came in, and they were really struggling, and he did 6 hours with me. I mean, he came in and did 12 30-minute sessions during the summer, and his reading score went up 4 years.
Wow.
In six hours. He passed the state exam for the first time the next year, went from C's to straight A's. His parents were fairly pleased.
Absolutely. So,
and I've never had a kid I couldn't get back up to reading level.
Wonderful. That's good news. So for folks who aren't really familiar with dyslexia and everything that it entails, would you be willing to share, just to give folks pretty much a general idea of what dyslexia is?
Sure. Dyslexia is, it actually comes from the Greek word dys, meaning trouble, and lexia, meaning words. So it's essentially trouble with words. Okay. And so, and we know what the cause is.
And that would be?
Well, folks who are easy readers, who read fluently, and it has nothing to do with IQ, read with these two spots on the left side of their brain, called Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Okay. Or maybe I've got them switched, I'm not sure. But and folks who are dyslexic read with the right side of their brain. There's a 1999 University of Washington study that indicated that and showed that that's the area of the brain that lights up when people read. And because they have to use 5 times more area of the brain to read, it's frustrating, and it makes them tired, and they have to work harder, and it's just more difficult. And so they don't like to do it, and so they get further and further and further behind. And essentially, the treatment that's effective involves putting two sensors here, measuring the electrical activity, and setting the kid in front of a computer with a book, and he hears the neurofeedback system beep when he activates that part of the brain. He learns to activate that part of the brain, and his reading gets better.
Okay.
I've never had a kid that I couldn't get back up to grade level.
Wonderful.
And the reason I love that is because that's the kind of thing that can change a kid's and a family's life for the rest of their life. And once they solve that and he stays up at reading level, then everything about school gets better. And you and I both know that if kids struggle with school, they often struggle with a lot of the things associated with that. They struggle socially, they struggle with their self-esteem, they struggle with their ideas about what they can be in the future. They don't feel very smart because they can't read. And it has nothing to do with intelligence or IQ. Nothing. Because even folks who have lower IQs, many of them can read fluently. Mm-hmm. They may not understand, they may not have great comprehension, but they can read. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a joy to watch a kid get better with his reading and watch him come in and smile, maybe for the first time, because he's not struggling with school anymore.
Absolutely.
And that's fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with children or even adults who have dyslexia, does it also affect their mathematical skills, or is it primarily just with coming to get familiar with and comfortable with reading per se?
It's dyslexia is reading.
It's all reading. So reading. As far as mathematics are concerned.
Well, and there is some research being done about whether or not neurofeedback can help with math, and the jury's still kind of out on that.
Okay.
So, but the reading for kids in school is everything. Absolutely. It's science, it's history, it's social studies. You know, if they can't read and comprehend those things, then they're going to struggle with all of those subject areas.
Okay, so for children who are assessed and diagnosed as being dyslexic, so would they have modifications or would they have accommodations? Just how do we service those children?
Well, and I have a little bit of a challenge with that, because I know that about 80% of the kids who are in special education are there because they're dyslexic. Mm-hmm. Okay, and one of the things we know is that kids typically get diagnosed with dyslexia second or third grade, sometimes a little later, but typically that. And if they get put in special education, about 90% of them are still in special education in the 12th grade. The schools spend an average, the study I saw, again, it's been several years, so the number's probably more now, but the study I saw said schools spend an average of $8,800 extra per year for every kid in special education.
Interesting. So from the parental standpoint of it, if a parent says, no, I don't want my child to be in a special ed class, so to speak, not that there's anything wrong with it, but they feel as though their child can meet the needs in mainstream just by way of accommodations or even modifications, how does that usually work out?
Well, that's usually what's called a 504 program, mm-hmm. and the schools have special people who will make modifications based on the testing that they do. The challenge is you typically use a multi-sensory program, and it takes lots of investment of time and energy and individual attention with the teacher. Mm-hmm. And you know, if I can solve it quicker, it's better for everybody.
Sure.
So that's the exciting thing about the new research and the new work that's being done with neurofeedback and dyslexia.
Okay.
So we have an opportunity to really change those kids and those families' lives for the rest of their life with neurofeedback.
Okay. So for the kids who do have those modifications or accommodations, while they're in their grade levels, let's say from 6th grade all the way until they graduate, does that transcend throughout their educational career when they go to college, or is there a drop-off point, or does it continue on? Just how does it work?
Well, you know, that's going to be individualized based on the child.
Okay.
And so for sometimes they're, you know, kids are, most colleges will do modifications if a kid has a diagnosed reading disorder or a math disorder, those kinds of things. In fact, I know a student who's in his second year of college, and I recently signed a letter said he'd been diagnosed with ADHD and we need to do some modifications, and they did. And the good news is that young man made the dean's list.
Outstanding.
For his first semester at somewhere else college. And the story behind that is in second grade, his elementary teacher told him he was retarded and would never amount to anything, and so he struggled because that self-concept that second grade teacher told him he wasn't ever even going to graduate high school.
Wow.
And so he recently sent me a picture of holding up the certificate with dean's list.
Outstanding.
I told him he should send that picture to that teacher.
I agree. I
don't think he did. I don't think he did, but I think they're gonna when he graduates from college, I think they're gonna send that teacher a picture of him with his diploma.
I think so. That's wonderful. So you referenced the 504. So with the 504, does that also carry on throughout their academic career?
Well, it should. If the schools are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that should carry on as long as there are educational difficulties and the student is not either up to reading level or having some problems functioning in the classroom.
Okay, that's good news. That's good news for parents who may have children and they've just been notified or they're trying to figure it out. So there's hope there.
Absolutely.
Indeed. So let's talk a little bit more about different areas that people who have been dyslexic or are dyslexic, as well as children or adults who have ADHD. As far as what does the future look like for them by way of careers? I mean, are they limited as to where it is that they can go and what they can do?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about ADHD. Almost nobody understands what causes it.
Okay.
And I tell parents this all the time. One of the things you have to determine with a child with ADHD is whether it's an I can't or I won't. Because for many of them, it's an I can't. There are several things that are different about the brain of someone with ADHD. Okay. And I use the word different on purpose. I don't use wrong or whatever. It's different. Mm-hmm. And this all occurs in this part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. Mm-hmm. Okay, that part of the brain is smaller. Mm-hmm. It's shaped differently. The glucose metabolism is different in that part of the brain. Blood flow is different. When you ask a child with ADHD to concentrate, blood flow to this part of the brain shuts off. There are pictures, we can prove it.
Okay.
And so at precisely the time they need the blood to flow to that part of the brain, it goes away, which makes them not I won't, but I can't. Okay? The electrical activity is different because your brain runs at different speeds just like a car does. And this part of the brain is responsible for thinking, planning, judgment, problem solving, impulse control, focus, staying calm. And it just doesn't work very well. The electrical activity for this part of the brain looks like it's asleep. There's too much slow activity and not enough what's called beta activity. Okay. And so what we typically do is we'll hook up electrical sensors to either this part of the brain or this part of the brain. We can set the computers and the software up to where Pac-Man only moves when they generate the right kinds of electrical activity there. So it teaches them how to work their brain. Okay. It's almost like doing a curl for your brain. You know, when you do a curl, guess what? It gets stronger.
You build up the muscle.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of that way. The research says with about 20 to 25 hours of neurofeedback, and it's very individualized, but with 20 to 25 hours, 85% of kids can get resolution to significant number of their symptoms, and the result tends to be long-term.
Outstanding.
Which means I can't use the word cure because that would be overstating it. Mm-hmm. But the research that's been done shows that neurofeedback is at least as effective and probably more effective than medication. And kids who undergo neurofeedback, about 50% of them can reduce or eliminate their medication completely.
Okay, and that was going to be my next question leading into it, because the general consensus is that anyone who's diagnosed with 2 chances to 1 they're going to be placed on some sort of medication. So what's your spin? What's your take on that?
Well, I'm not a parent, but I think if I had a child with ADHD, if they couldn't function without the medication, I would put them on it.
Okay.
But I'm not a fan of long-term medication simply because we just don't know. There are no studies which can tell us what being on a medication long-term can do to a child in terms of their emotional, psychological, brain development. And there are some medications that I absolutely would not put my child on because they have some, some of the studies indicate one of them cause cancer.
Oh my.
And in one of them, after taking a medication for 3 months, every one of those patients had genetic abnormalities in their genes.
Interesting.
And that's a little scary.
It is.
And so, you know, I want to be very careful about that. And yet at the same time, they have to get through school. They have to graduate. They have to make their grades. So, and one of the things we do when we talk with parents about ADHD is we want to try to eliminate everything else. If the kids aren't getting enough sleep, that's going to cause a problem with focus and distractibility.
Absolutely.
If their diet is not what it needs to be, if they're not getting enough protein. You know, it's really funny because the schools always say on testing days, be sure your child gets enough sleep and gets a good breakfast. Mm-hmm. And it's because they know they want them to have protein. Mm-hmm. You know, a child needs 20 to 25 grams of protein both at breakfast and lunch. And the way they get that is eggs and meat and milk and cheese. I talked about the rule of 7s. Okay? And so I'm going to ask you, how many grams of protein in an egg?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm going to give you a hint. How many grams of protein in an egg?
I'll take a stab. 7.
Very nice. Okay. How many grams of protein in 7 ounces of milk?
I'll be willing to bet 7.
The rule of 7s. A slice of cheese?
7.
A couple of pieces of sausage?
I'll take a swag. 7.
Okay. All right. Last question. How many grams of protein in a peanut butter sandwich?
Maybe 6. Maybe 7.
15.
15. Aren't you the tricky one?
Yeah, but the kids need protein, and most of them, you know, an adolescent probably needs 10 hours of sleep. Mm-hmm. Most of them don't get that.
No.
And if they're not getting enough sleep, they can't regulate themselves emotionally, mm-hmm. and they can't focus and pay attention. There are a lot of other things that cause problems with focus and attention. If they got problems with allergies, mm-hmm. as an example. And there are a whole set of other kinds of medical conditions that you have to eliminate when you're doing a diagnosis with ADHD that most people just won't take the time to do. The doctors don't, primarily because they don't have time. Mm-hmm. Typically what the doctor will say is, well, let's try medication. And if the focus and attention got better, then, well, it was ADHD. Well, that's not a great way to do that. No. So what we do is we'll hook up the sensors and we'll take a look at that ratio of slow to fast waves. Mm-hmm. And if it's beyond a certain level, then we know his brain is operating too slowly. I had a kid one time who came in and was just as frustrated as he can be. And he was 3rd grade and he had math tests, mm-hmm. Multiplication. Mm-hmm. And on a Tuesday, he did a test with 50 problems and he got a 94%. He just missed 3. And the very next day, the same material exactly, because I looked at him, it was 100 problems, okay, and he got a 38%.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because this test with 50 problems, he had as much time as he needed. And this test with 100 problems, he had to do it in 3 minutes. And so when he got under that time pressure, his brain just kind of shut down. Mm-hmm. And I told him, I said, you know the material. You're a smart kid. Mm-hmm. The only thing that this second test measured was whether you could do 100 problems in 3 minutes. Didn't measure whether you knew it or not. Just 100 problems in 3 minutes. And he kind of went, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So he felt better about it. Sure. And those are the kinds of things we have to do with kids with ADHD. Explain their disorder to them, let them understand what's going on in their brain, create an awareness or help them to create an awareness of when they're focused and when they're not.
Okay.
And if we can do that, then they got a much better shot at doing well in school.
Okay. So
And coping with the challenges that it brings. And I would say there are a lot of people who are very successful who have ADHD. There are a number of major league ball players. Who's the guy that does the home show tie? What's his name? Pennington? As ADHD as he can be. A lot of comedians. Robin Williams, absolutely, very much. But very successful people because they have folks who have ADHD have energy and focus and can balance lots of things and go in lots of directions and are very aware of the world that's around them. That distractibility is also awareness of other things and other people.
I'm just sure, so I guess the same could be said for individuals who've been diagnosed with dyslexia. They go on to be successful too, I would imagine.
Absolutely. You know, they can absolutely go on to be successful. But the exciting news is that the research says that we can get those kids back up to grade level.
That is good news. That is very.
It's exciting. It's fun. It's fun to see those kids, you know, begin to succeed, and then you see them out somewhere, and they come up and they hug you and they tell you how well they are doing in school, and you'll see a parent, you know, with a little tear in their eye, just grateful because it changed their family's life.
To see their child achieve.
Yeah, and when that happens, the tenor in the home gets different. Other children who may have been neglected because of the problems with the ADHD child, they begin to get more attention. Homes get happier, less arguments, less argumentative, more cooperation. You don't have to tell kids as much 17 times to go do something.
Sure.
And so to see the parents, you know, level of stress go down, that's fun too.
Outstanding. Well, before we close it out today,
Okay.
this has been very informative, and I thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you to provide maybe some insight or some words of advice to parents before they go in to see their pediatrician. You know, some parting words that will give them encouragement going in for an assessment, or again, like I said, see a pediatrician or a physician regarding either ADHD or dyslexia.
Can I recommend a book? Can I recommend a couple of books?
Absolutely.
All right. My favorite book on ADHD is a book called Parenting Children with ADHD by Vincent Monastra, Monastra.
Okay.
Dr. Monastra has an attention disorders clinic in Endicott, New York, is the guy doing most of the research, most of the really good research about ADHD and neurofeedback, is part of the group that has actually proved that the medication works as well or better, and in my opinion knows more about it than anybody on the planet. Parenting Children with ADHD is an inexpensive book. It's in paperback, written for parents, probably about $15, and not written for professionals, written for parents, which can explain to you the origin and of ADHD and what causes it in a very understandable way. It talks about treatments. It talks about 504s. It talks about diet and exercise and sleep and all those kinds of things. And in terms of diagnosis, I would say a couple things. One is absolutely talk to your doctor, find out what he thinks in terms of medication, but be sure that you eliminate all of the other things that potentially could cause issues of distractibility and lack of focus and those kinds of things, because you have to eliminate all of those things. Seizures, as an example. Had a client come in one time and the EEG marker looked funny. It didn't look normal. And I made a recommendation that they go see a neurologist, and come to find out she was having lots of seizures as a result of a tumor. And so the doctor discovered the tumor. It was operable. They operated on it, and it saved her life. Because we did that more complete, looking at the neurofeedback, looking at the assessment, and you have to feel good about that. So make sure you do a complete assessment to eliminate all those other things and explore some different treatments. I'm a believer in neurofeedback.
Good.
Seen it work.
Alrighty, thank you. Well, we appreciate you for coming, Mr. Ellis.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.